Good day and welcome to HCA Talks Health. I'm your host, Zina Leroux, and our goal with these podcasts is to share with our audience the powerful ways that people can take control of their health and transform the quality of their lives. And today I have the privilege to talk to Michael Arloski, and he's a pioneering architect of the field of health and wellness coaching. And he has trained thousands of coaches around the world. And even though he is a psychologist with more than 25 years of clinical work and a lot of professional contribution to the field of health and wellness promotion, he really sees the value of coach-like behavioral change, the methodology around that for helping people to succeed at lasting lifestyle improvement. So welcome, Michael. It really is lovely to have you on the show today.
Oh, definitely my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Lovely. So what I think we need to start with is maybe just a quick explanation from your side of what the difference is between therapy and coaching, because I think there might still be a little bit of confusion around that.
Oh yeah, I'm really very dedicated to clearing that up, you might say, being both psychologist and coach,
Yeah.
and have done a lot of clinical work over the years and so forth. And it's really important for coaches in particular to understand that so that they can feel free enough to work with emotions, to not shy away from it. They have to learn how to do that, and yet know how to do that without crossing that thin line over into the therapeutic world. And, one of the ways that I really kind of make the distinction is that therapy really is about, among other things, it's about healing the old wounds of the past and how they're getting in the way today.
Yeah.
Now, coaches are not trained to do that. They just are not. Our training is quite inadequate compared to someone who's a trained mental health professional. So the difference really is that coaching is about helping people achieve what they want to achieve to make their lives better. And it really is taking a look at how the past is relevant to today. You can talk about things that happened way back when in terms of how relevant are they to today. Resolution, however, is the job of the therapist. So if your client is someone who had very critical type of parents, let's say, who, really made life difficult and maybe punished them easily, maybe made sure that they couldn't do anything for themselves until they got all their work done, et cetera, et cetera. Person's going to have a lot of feelings about that, a lot of unfinished business about that. And yet resolving all that can really be done through therapy. That's a great thing. It's a wonderful thing. But resolving it, processing those emotions, trying to work out all those unfinished feelings with parents, that's getting into really deep water. Deep water that coaches really aren't prepared to deal with. Whereas a therapist, I like to say, can go anywhere with anyone. The coach, however, can say, okay, so, I understand you had that really difficult upbringing. You've told me about that. It sounds really hard. How does that get in the way today for you doing things for yourself to be healthy and well? How's it relevant? That we can explore, because what you end up, a lot of coaches, and I'm sure you've seen it yourself there, where people have the need for more self-care, taking time for yourself, even taking time to exercise, go for a walk, get the help that you need, to ask for the help that you need, all these things. And yet some of that old stuff definitely becomes an internal barrier. Well, we can talk about it as it's relevant. So that's my big distinction: resolution versus relevance.
Okay. So we don't necessarily have to solve the wounds of the past in a coaching process in order to help the client move forward, or to hold the space even around some of the emotions that they are experiencing around that, but the focus is the future instead of the past, right? Yeah. Okay.
Moving from there, then and there and then, however you want to say it, to here and now, and where we go from here.
Okay. And I guess that's one of the reasons why you are such a fan of coaching, right? So just tell me a little bit more about that. How did you get into the area of coaching, and why are you such a fan?
Yeah. I'd say it really I started heading in that direction, or I was sort of primed to go in that direction, because I was always fascinated with humanistic psychology, growth, human potential, the work of people like Abraham Maslow, Carl Rogers, Virginia Satir, people like that. And they were always talking about the things that positive psychology people talk about today. And as a result, I was very attracted to the wellness movement many years ago. I was very fortunate. I was able to go to the first wellness conference in the history of the whole world back in the late 70s. And I've been very involved in that field ever since. I was working in university counseling centers, and I did that for a total of 17 years. And one of the problems with a psychologist that works in a university counseling center is there's only one way to move up, and that's to become a counseling center director. And as a director, you really don't have much opportunity to do counseling anymore. You're pretty much a university administrator. And I did that for about half a year as an acting director, and I learned that I really didn't want to do that. I didn't want to essentially change careers. So as I was kind of in this go nowhere situation, I looked around and I came across this newly forming field of coaching, life coaching, business coaching, leadership coaching, and so forth. The International Coaching Federation was formed in 1995. And in 1996, 97, I got my training as a coach, saw that it was different than being a psychologist or a therapist, and realized I needed to have specific training in coaching. So I went to Coaches Training Institute, learned really the craft of coaching, and started working independently from, you might say, from ground zero. And loved what I was doing, loved the potential of it, loved what results were happening. And when I started working with people around health challenges and that kind of thing, I just saw that, the whole idea of combining what we knew about wellness and health promotion with coaching just was a natural fit and had to happen.
Yeah, I love that. And obviously you've written quite a bit on the topic, and what I want to dive a bit deeper into today is the book that you've recently written, and that is called Masterful Health and Wellness Coaching. And that is about deepening your craft as a coach, right? And one of your aims with this book is to give coaches the tools to evolve from a good coach to one of exceptional ability, right? So maybe you can just give us some info on, on the book and what inspired you to write this specific one.
Yeah. Yeah, really, it may sound, pretentious a little bit, but really I wrote it to elevate the craft, elevate the field, the whole profession. Because what I was observing in a lot of the coaches we were training, especially when they got training from other programs and so forth, was that coaching had become pretty basic in a lot of places. It was about SMART goals. It was about accountability. A lot of organizations that were trying to leverage the numbers were making coaching calls extremely short and really quite basic. And when you really look at coaching and it's what it aspires to do with people, it's really to evoke transformation. How do you help someone transform who they are so that they can live their life better the entire rest of their life? It isn't just about, okay, like you see some studies, and I understand we have to build studies about behavior from the ground up and pretty basic. But, some of the studies are, well, X number of people were walking at this low level. Now they're walking at this much higher level per week, and our study is a success. Well, that's great. But we're not just trying to change one behavior for the length of a study.
Mm-hmm.
We have the daunting task of helping someone change the way they live and make it last for the entire rest of their life. That's really kind of a big deal.
It is. It
so,
is.
so coaches need to have skills. They need to have presence. They need to have depth to be able to really help people do that. And that's why I wanted to really share a lot of what I knew. And we ended up with a 412-page book.
Yes, it was quite a read, hey? And I found it very insightful. But I like this idea of you centering it around transformation, right? And your description of transformation, like you said, your prerequisite is it should be lasting, it should be enduring. It's not about a 12-week program to lose the weight and then just gain that and more back, right? That we so often see in the diet industry. So your view is really that for lifestyle improvement to be successful, it must endure for a lifetime. Otherwise, it's it's not successful. So just tell us a little bit more about this. And, why is it that people find long-term transformation so difficult?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. My first book was called Wellness Coaching for Lasting Lifestyle Change. And my constant joke is I didn't write a book entitled Wellness Coaching for Temporary Lifestyle Change.
Exactly.
We see that, like you just said, continuously. So I did a presentation at a conference one time on how do we make, the change last. And I dug into the literature, and I was really kind of astonished at the paucity of work out there on long-term health behavior change. There really isn't much out there. There's our big, population health longitudinal studies, like the Framingham study in Massachusetts and so forth, that was on heart disease and so forth. Some of those things, there's work that we're seeing coming out of the blue zones and the work of the people that Dan Buettner put together. So we do have some guides, but for the most part, there just isn't that much information. But what I did come across was a consortium that was working on the same problem. And they did a huge literature survey. They also conducted like 20 studies of their own. And they could really come down to two factors that they could identify that they felt had the most impact on making behavior change, health behavior change last. And it's always interesting when you ask people, what do you think they were? So, do you have any guesses yourself?
Long-term change.
I'll bet you can nail one of them.
Probably the environment, right? The environment needs to support you, right?
Community support was absolutely one of them.
Great.
Yes. Yeah, very good. Yeah, I mean, and it seems natural, logical. So one of the things that we really need to do in coaching is not just be working with our individual, but always be thinking of them in the context of where they live. Are they living somewhere where it's really difficult to be well, like my old hometown? Or are they living somewhere where it's easier to be well? Are they in a workplace where it's easier to be well? All those things. Do they have people around them and an environment around them, like you just said, that supports their efforts at being healthy and well? That's huge. The other single factor was a change in self-concept. And that was interesting because it wasn't just self-esteem. It wasn't even, they didn't even identify self-efficacy, which we often talk about. But I think self-efficacy follows this. And the idea of self-concept is a change in who you believe you are, and a shift in that, shifting from, well, I'm just somebody who's doing the best they can, and I just kind of do what I've always done, and I'm not very conscious about how I'm living my life and lifestyle, to someone who is very conscious.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm saying to myself, well, now I'm a runner, I'm a bicyclist, I'm a outdoors person, I'm, whatever it might be, or I'm a person that's really into plant-based food and healthy eating and so forth and so on. A change in who you kind of see yourself as, that tends to last.
Uh-huh. Very
So
interesting.
how,
Yeah.
so how can we support that? How can we coach for connectedness so that the person really is out there finding more resources that are going to help them to live that healthy, well life?
Mm. Yes, and finding like-minded individuals, right? Because I see so often with my clients as well, when they've got a social environment, where bad habits are encouraged, it's really difficult to make that change. To maybe coach them to find a new group with like-minded individuals could make a big difference. So it really is that combination of environmental support and the internal shifts. So
Yeah.
as you mentioned, who you think you are, but I think also who you think you ought to be, right? And
Yeah,
that's also
right.
something that you touch on in the book,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
there's a big difference there.
Yeah, there really is. And that's one of the reasons that, coaches have learned to help someone create what we call a well life vision of
Mm,
themselves.
mm,
You know, have that positive view in the future of seeing yourself living your best life possible. And realizing, you don't snap your fingers and it happens overnight. You have to build toward it. But when you have that goal of where you're headed,
mm,
then you can create a map to get there. Yeah.
mm. And that's the difference between an away from goal and a towards goal, right? So often
Right.
we first start seeing people when they don't want to be fat anymore, they don't want to be ill anymore. But the moment we create that vision, it's
Mhm.
they can show up each day with more clarity. What do I need to do next to get there? And often they feel more motivated to get there,
Exactly.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, we always talk about fear motivation, like you're
Mm,
saying, the away from goal. I want to stay away from the operating table.
exactly. Yeah.
So a lot of our, efforts at health promotion in the past have been, to avoid this and avoid that. And, it's been really kind of negatively based.
Mm,
And one of the things that we have learned from the whole positive psychology movement is that, you know, positive things that attract people have more power than just avoiding things.
mm,
Now, fear-based motivation can get you started, and that can be great,
mm,
terrific. Sometimes that person really needs to get shook up and realize, wow, I'm headed toward a cliff here,
mm,
and if I don't put on the brakes, it's going to be really bad. However, often it doesn't last.
mm,
And so a lasting motivation, um, that, like you just said, that drawing toward, type of goal,
mm.
living
Yeah.
that life, that can really motivate.
Yeah.
And the book, I talk about some well life visions that were very powerful that some of my clients used maximally, that helped them tremendously.
Lovely. Yeah, and you referred earlier to Maslow, right? And
Mhm.
there's a very interesting concept that you explain where, he spoke of self-actualization versus self-image actualization, right? So that's
Mhm.
just coming back
Mhm.
to the idea of who you think you ought to be, right? And often when we start out with a client and we've got this well-lived vision, or they've got a well-lived vision planned out for themselves, we really need to distinguish and make sure, that it really
Ah,
is about their true authentic nature compared to who they think they should be. Right. So can you maybe give us some tips on how do you make sure, or
mhm.
how do you coach a client to make sure that it's not about who they think they ought to be, and it's more
Right.
authentic?
Yeah. Oh, I love that question. And that's that's a first time question on that. I love it. Of all the
Okay,
interviews I've had, that's brilliant.
good.
Uh, yeah, really. I think Maslow was definitely on the right track there, and we see this so much in popular media, trying to influence people about who they think they should be. Um, we see it in entertainment. We see it in the mass media for sure, and we see it in even in our peer groups. You know, the influences that others have, and I think really it's about helping people clarify their values.
Mm,
What really are your values? What truly, you know, is important to you? What are the true priorities in your life? And helping someone to clarify that to make sure that those long-term aspirations are in alignment with their values, and help them kind of question, well, where did I get that value? You
mm,
know,
mm,
is that something that's true to me, or did I just kind of grasp onto that because a lot of my friends were into that, or it seemed popular, or that kind of thing? And then also just kind of doing the you know, what's realistic, you know, kind of exploration with somebody. You know, one of the things that I really believe coaches need to do with clients is plenty of exploration instead of just real quickly trying to identify what behavior do we want to change. Let's set some goals to change it. Let's set some action steps. Let's set some accountability, and we're good to go.
mm,
It's not that simple.
mm, mm. Yeah. And also listening more deeply, right? So it's not just about what they're saying, but also
Right.
their body language and their tone of voice. We need to pick up
Yeah.
on those things to see if this is authentic or if this is maybe coming from their
Mhm.
culture or certain beliefs that they have or even trauma that they've experienced. They,
Yeah.
so we need to be on the
Yeah.
lookout for those things.
Yeah. Look for the incongruities.
Yeah.
You know, the laughter that is kind of inappropriate for the moment.
Yeah. Mm,
Something sad and they're laughing about it, you know, type of thing. You know, we're
mm,
not going to confront them every time someone does something like that, but it's really paying attention, like you say. The deep listening is really about noticing, you know, and you know, the definition of mindfulness is noticing without judging, and that's what a coach is continuously doing. But
mm,
we're also making distinctions, and there's a difference between a judgment and a distinction.
mm,
Okay, and trying to distinguish, okay, is this congruent or incongruent, you know, between what they were saying and how they're, you know, showing up, like you said, non-verbally? Is there an incongruity here between what they've said in the past about their values, what they're saying now?
mm,
You know, it's all of those kinds of things.
mm,
And that can really be something we can bring people's awareness to,
mm,
and just simply bring their awareness to it and let them work with it rather
mm.
than try to interpret it.
Yes.
Mhm.
And I think it's important to know that, if they are working towards something that they think they ought to be, that they won't
Mhm.
necessarily get the fulfillment um,
Mhm.
that they were looking for when they achieve the goal, right? So we need to take that into consideration. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes asking people, um, you know, it's kind of like a question to kind of hit yourself with. Who says?
Mm,
Who says I need to be doing that?
mm.
Where's that coming from? Is that really, you know, within me, coming from my own heart, who I am? Or is that, like you just said, coming from ought tos and shoulds and,
Yeah.
you know, the, you know, trends and influences that are, you know, there, and we need to choose among those things what we want to take in and what we want to spit back out.
Mm, yeah. And I
Hmm.
think for us as coaches to be able to pick up on those things, we need
Hmm.
to be in a good space, right?
Right.
And this is something that you touch on in your book, where it's really important to maintain a vigilant level of self-awareness as a
Hmm.
coach, and we need to also get ourselves out of the way when we're coaching. We need to be aware of our own values, of our own beliefs, our preferences, all of those agendas even, that might be interfering with the coaching process and the relationship. And as you mentioned in the book as well, there are not many other professions that require such self-awareness. Now, when you're a doctor or a dentist, it's not necessarily required, but it's crucial for the coaching process. So maybe you can tell us a bit more on what the impact could be on a coaching process when you don't have that self-awareness as a coach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really appreciate you bringing that up, because we are in kind of a unique profession. Therapists, I think, as well need to be doing this, of course, but our own values, beliefs, our own issues or unfinished business of our own can definitely get in the way.
Mm-hmm.
And something the helping professions have been saying for many years is get yourself out of the way. You don't want to be putting your agenda onto your client. One of the first things we learn about coaching is that it's really very client-centered. Mm-hmm. And the client's agenda is the agenda. Now, there's one little caveat, and that's the safety of the client. Mm-hmm. If the client's agenda is to, ride their bicycle toward a cliff, we're going to say something, and that's metaphorically, but in reality, it might be engaging in some disproven diet or, something else like that might endanger their health. Mm-hmm. So we do have, a responsibility there. But otherwise, we have to be very, like you said, self-vigilant. Like, I've been practicing Tai Chi for over 30 years. And do I want to push Tai Chi on every client of mine because I know all the benefits of it? Isn't it great? Or the person that loves yoga or plant-based eating and so forth and so on. Mm-hmm. That's terrific. But how am I maybe kind of subtly attempting to influence my client? Part of it is how we ask questions. Mm-hmm. And I remember working with a student one time that I was mentoring, and she had been trained by a coach training organization. That wasn't a health and wellness organization, but it was more of a life coach training, where questions were really the thing. And she even said, good coaching should be 80% coaching is what she learned, or 80% questions. Oh. And to me, well, ideally 100% questions. And I really disagree with that. I think you got to use all the other tools. Mm. But what she was doing with her questions is she was using leading questions. Mm. And she literally manipulated her client to get to the solution that she envisioned for that client. Mm. I mean, it was bordering unethical, really, the recording I listened to. Mm. And yet, when we really have that lack of self-vigilance, or we think that it's okay for us to push an agenda because we know how good it is for somebody. And truly, most coaches do this because they just really want to help. Mm-hmm. And they really believe in, whatever, trendy health kick they're on. That really gets in the way, to say the least. Mm. So it's about self-awareness and awareness of our client.
Yes.
And awareness of the coaching relationship.
Yes, and I also think, taking care of ourselves as well, having the ability to stay sharp and having the stamina for the kind of work, right? And it's going to come much easier when we are living or we are meeting our emotional needs ourselves, right? We're doing the things that we love. Right. Because you said in the book that when you observe these sessions, when you observe Masterful coaching, the style of the coach may vary, but one thing that's always present is that centeredness, right? That's what makes a good coach, or that's one of the elements that really makes a good coach. And in order to be centered, there's a lot of things that needs to be taken care of. We need to do our own work, and our own journey of personal growth and gaining that self-awareness needs to be ongoing. It's not a once-off thing, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That is so important. And I'm always asking, students, what centers you in your life?
Yeah.
What are the things that you do on a regular basis that help you feel grounded, centered, right here, right now, healthy and well. And you probably realize them when you aren't doing those things and the effect that it has upon you. You know, like I remember going in to see my chiropractor one time, and he said, as he was feeling my tense body, boy, you haven't been out hiking or fishing lately, have you? You know,
He knew.
yeah, he knew.
Yeah.
It was showing up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So our own personal wellness foundation and personal growth, as you mentioned, is a continual commitment.
Mm.
And it not only gives us credibility and integrity. I mean, you know, we don't have to look like we're on the cover of Fit magazine. We just have to be dedicated to our own wellness.
Mm.
But it also can give us empathy toward our clients.
Mm.
By us working on our own wellness and seeing how challenging it can be at times, we start to understand, oh, you know, this isn't as easy as I thought. And no wonder my clients really struggle with this. Yeah. It helps us to really connect and understand what people's experience can be.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I think often people think, especially when they're just building up their practice, they feel like, they just need to put more time into the business, into the coaching, see more
Right.
clients. But taking out that time for yourself is actually part of growing your business, of creating the space for yourself is so important, right? And I think what goes with that as well is, of course, clear boundaries, right? Because I think that if it's very difficult to avoid resentment if we don't have clear boundaries, right? And you actually quote Brene Brown and her studies, which shows that that's actually the one thing that all the people who are very compassionate, or some of the most compassionate people, that they all have in common, is that they have very clear boundaries, right? So the presence of clear boundaries really allows us, I think, to relax and to have the healthiest and the most functional of relationships. So are there any tips maybe that you can give us on how to have strong boundaries and what that looks like in a session?
Right. Yeah, that is so important for us to be able to empathize and not avoid empathic connection. I think one of the reasons that people avoid it is exactly what Brene Brown says in that great little video of hers about empathy, where she says, it's a vulnerable choice to be empathic, because to connect with you, I have to connect with a part of me that knows that feeling that you're going through.
Yeah.
Am I willing to do that? Can I handle that? Can I engage in what we call compassionate detachment, where I'm right here, right now with you. I'm right here, shoulder to shoulder with you on this, and yet I'm not owning it, and I'm not taking it home with me. Because I'm going to respect your ability to handle this, and I'm going to respect myself enough not to burden myself with your situation. And yet, because I'm centered enough, because I'm getting my own emotional needs met well enough, I'm able to be right here, right now with you. And when I'm not, I need to be able to recognize that. Like, let's say you're a coach who's just lost a parent, and lo and behold, in comes your client who's just lost a parent. And you can empathize, you can connect and all that, but you might not be able to process that with them as much as someone who isn't feeling what you're feeling right now. And you may need to be honest with your client about that.
So in essence, we need to consider our own capacity in that moment, but also we need to stand beside them and make sure that we're not taking on their burden for them, or even taking it home with us, right? And I think what's very important there is to be able to respect our client's own strength as well, because then we won't have to deplete our own. And then we will just be holding the space for them while they figure that out. That's the positive regard that we have for them.
Exactly. And tying it back to boundaries, which was really your question there, that allows us, I think, to feel more secure in the boundaries. There's a difference between me and you.
Yeah.
But also it can show up in terms of boundaries around, we're going to have a professional relationship here.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that, say, for example, I was mentoring a client, a student who was sharing a recording, and she got into talking about a particular diet with her client. Now, the coach was not a registered dietitian or anything like that. And they got to talking kind of like friends about this popular diet that everybody's heard of, and I'm not going to mention. And the tricks of the trade of how to negotiate this diet and so forth and so on. And it sounded like a couple of friends chatting at a coffee shop, which, if they were just a couple of friends at a coffee shop, that would be fine. But this is a professional coach.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you just can't do that because you're out of scope of practice.
Yeah,
Okay?
exactly. Mm-hmm.
Now you can question the person's, information about it. Where did they get it? What are they aware of? Are they aware of contradictory information about it? You can inquire about all those things, but can you coach them, so to speak, about how to execute that diet? No, you're not qualified to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another example of boundaries around scope of practice, boundaries around professionalism.
Yeah.
What's interesting about coaching is we are friendly with our clients, but we can't be friends in terms of the way people are close, good buddies, chums, or whatever term you want to use. It's a little different.
Mm-hmm.
And our clients actually want that, because they've been talking with friends for a long time about how to be healthy and well, and it hasn't gotten them where they needed to go. They really do need that professional to work with. And yet we're not as we don't have to have as much distance as, say, a therapist that's working with a pathological population. We can be a whole lot friendlier than that.
Yes, thankfully. Yeah. And I think there's also a lot of safety for the client when they experience, if there is boundaries, right? There's
Yeah.
a sense of safety for them to maybe explore more compared to just a friendly relationship, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
So one of the things that I've noticed, when you are holding the space for a client is that when they do tend to feel stuck, so this is kind of jumping onto a whole new topic, but something that I do want to touch on. So when people feel stuck, I often notice that many of them feel like they don't have a choice. They don't have a choice in changing what is not working for them. I see this so often. And I think it really is a coach's job to remind people that obviously that they do have choices, but maybe you can give us some insight on how is it that people even got there? How is it that so many people believe that they don't have a choice in the first place?
Yeah. Oh, I love you bring that up. And, when you say that it's a coach's job to remind people they have choices, you're actually quoting, believe it or not, Thomas Leonard, who was one of the founders of the whole coaching field, the whole life coaching field. And that's what he said a coach's job was. Yeah. And people do forget that they have choices. And I talk about owning your choices. Yeah. Let's say that I like to joke around and call it a company called We Abuse Our Employees Incorporated. All right. And you have a job there and you have an income and you have to keep that income coming in. All right. You can't just quit tomorrow and, be okay. So the person feels trapped, right? And when we feel trapped or stuck, boy, that's more stress than practically anything. And when you can work with a person and help them explore that and see that, okay, I'm in a difficult situation. How can I change that situation? Well, maybe I can't change it overnight. So as I'm working toward improving it or working toward changing it, I'm owning the fact that I'm choosing to work there now because I know I need to. And when that person owns that choice, it's amazing how it frees them up. They're able to go through that door at the company the next day a whole lot more easily than when they just, hate it and resent it and, are angry about having to go there another day. So part of it is holding out that prospect of change, that you can make things better. Likewise, a person that's in a very bad sociological situation where they live, maybe their environment around them is, a place where it's extremely difficult to be healthy and well. How can they come up with strategies to make the best of that? We can talk about, strategic thinking and coaching. Where can I find resources in this community that maybe I didn't even know were there? How can I band together with other people to make it a better community? All those kinds of things, or a relationship. You're in a relationship with someone, your partner, and it's very difficult, very challenging. Exploring what can be done, exploring possibilities, and helping the person to see, what they need to do that, and maybe how they may need the help of a therapist to bridge that gap. This is another example of where coaching can't do it all. That kind of thing.
Yeah, so helping them to see the possibilities, even if the bigger situation can't change, there's often something that we can do, something that is within our control to some or other degree. But I think something that also plays a role there is, our mindset. Like you said, I'm choosing now to be here. So just our mindset could make a big difference in itself. And I think, that's where our beliefs come in as well, right? And there's a quote in your book that I love where you say, well, I'm not sure if you're quoting someone perhaps, but reality is not so much what happens to us, rather it's how we think about those events that create the reality we experience, right?
Exactly.
So our thoughts are really powerful in that sense. And I think that for some people listening maybe to this might think that it's a bit of a fairy dust statement, but I really want to remind them that this concept is even taken into consideration in most scientific studies, right? It's the placebo effect, where they need to take the power of the mind into consideration when they're researching the effects of certain medications, for example, right? So tell us a little bit more about this and how we can skillfully address beliefs that are keeping clients stuck.
Yeah. I'll talk about it in general in just a moment, but one quick way that coaches can help people with this is identifying assumptions. Because one way people stay stuck is they assume things. Like let's say I'm back in my old hometown, which is in the upper Ohio River Valley, 40 miles from Pittsburgh, where the steel industry is gone. There's a lot of poverty. And I think I'm in a bad situation, can't do anything about it. I assume there's nothing I can do about it. I assume that there are not resources available, but I've never checked them out. I just assume they aren't available, or they aren't available for someone like me. Now, that may be true, maybe unfortunately to a larger extent than should be, but do I know that? And how do I know that? So something I'll ask a client when they come up with an assumption, I'll say, so tell me, how do you know that to be true? And usually the person will say, well, I don't really know it to be true, but I'm afraid it's true. Okay, that's a fear. Now we can talk about fears. That's different. Okay. See the difference there?
I love that.
And so checking out the assumptions helps the person get a realistic idea what resources are available to me. Maybe there are people I can ask for help. What's holding me back from asking for help? Sometimes people, their own pride gets in the way, right? all kinds of things like that.
Mm.
But, you're talking about mindset, and mindset is gigantic. And
Yeah.
this is something that I've been looking at for a long time, because I always talk about how important it is for coaches to operate on the coaching mindset
Mm.
instead of the treatment mindset, the consultant mindset, the educator mindset.
Mm.
But the field of mindset has been studied by two people in particular from Stanford University. One is Carol Dweck, Dweck. She talks about the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset.
Mm. Mm.
And the other is Aliyah Crum, Crum, who talks about how powerful mindset is in determining all kinds of reactions that we have. It's like
Mm.
a preset um, way of viewing the world that
Mm.
then is like a lens that we look through, and it sees some things accurately and it distorts some things, right?
Mhm.
You know, and she has a very famous study about how powerful mindset is. She worked with a number of people, a good population of people in the hotel business, the essentially women that clean the rooms and fix them up for the next guest. Okay. And quite a few of these women were overweight. And when she asked them, do you get enough exercise, to be healthy and well? They say, oh, no, I come home, I'm tired, I don't have time to exercise, I've got to get dinner ready and, so forth. Well, she put activity monitoring devices on them with their permission, and the data was amazing. And she came back to them and said, you all are moving and exercising in your work every day at a level equivalent to an Olympic athlete in training.
Wow.
That's all she did. She just told them that, and they lost weight.
Ah, wow.
Boom. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
So
yeah.
how we see ourselves in the world,
Mm,
what we think
absolutely.
about ourselves,
Yeah.
it has this ripple effect that shows up in all kinds of places.
Oh, yeah, it's so powerful, right? Oh gosh. So just thinking that we're getting enough exercise is actually going to impact our physiology. Isn't that powerful? Yeah,
No,
wow.
amazing. Yeah.
Okay, so
Mhm.
is there anything else that you maybe want to mention just as a last mention on the book, or that you want to specifically mention to coaches out there um, before we end off?
Well, you know, I would say that I've just been so privileged to encounter so many people that want to help people be healthy and well. I talk about creating allies for a healthy world.
Mm.
And that's really how we need to think of ourselves, as allies.
Mm.
How can I be in alliance with this person to help them live their best life possible,
Mm.
help them determine what that is, help them get that.
Yeah.
And it comes back to what you were saying about, being kind to yourself,
Mm.
um, being caring toward yourself.
Mm.
A lot of it comes back to self-compassion.
Yeah.
And there's a wonderful, wonderful book called "When Things Fall Apart" by Pema Chodron, and I'm always recommending that to people when they're going through a hard time,
Mm.
and to everyone, because the message over and over again is kindness toward yourself.
Mm. Mm.
So when coaches are working at building their career, working at learning these skills, working perhaps at building a business, or working for a company, that has a lot of demands. Um, Engaging in our own self-care is huge.
Mm.
And we need to continuously be doing that. Um, again, Thomas Leonard once said a coach's job was to help people eliminate tolerations and get their needs met.
Mm.
And when you think
Mm.
about it, if you're getting your needs met in all those different dimensions of wellness, the personal, emotional, spiritual, not just the physical, and you're not tolerating things, you're confronting things that you need to work through. You're not, putting up with treatment that's not proper, et cetera, et cetera. Life is pretty good.
Mm.
It really is.
Mm.
So a lot of it keeps coming back to your own personal wellness foundation.
It
What you
does.
were saying,
Mm.
what centers you in your life, what grounds you, what feeds your soul.
Mm.
Yeah.
And that makes it so much easier to be an ally for our clients and to show up for people in general in our lives. I guess that applies to everyone out there. It's easier to show up and be in a good space, to be in relationship when we are taking care of ourselves in that way and nourishing ourselves in a way that really serves us. Thank you,
Exactly.
Michael. It's really been so insightful to be able to speak to you, and your calming presence is really so contagious. It's lovely to share the space with you, even though it's via Zoom.
Yeah, right.
And yes, really, for any coach out there who wants to deepen their craft and take their coaching skills to the next level, I would highly recommend that you read Michael's book. So just one last question on where else they could get hold of you. Do you maybe have a website that you want to
Oh,
share
sure.
with us?
Absolutely. Yeah, realbalance.com. Uh,
Realbalance.com.
yep. Real
Okay,
balance. Yep.
lovely. Okay, thank you,
Yeah.
Michael. So that's it for now. And thank you for joining us, and good luck with your journey going forward from here.
Oh, and best of luck with yours. Wonderful interview. I really appreciated your insightful questions. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Mhm.